Welcome to Tabletop Gaming Guild. Tabletop Gaming Guild is all about the experiences and memories that playing games with friends and families can create. Today we'll be skewing our normal episodes for a special Top 10 Games episode where we'll be going over our top 10 games of all time and seeing why James' list has not changed.
Yay!
I will be starting off today with a game that's been on many of our lists in many of the past years. That's Dead of Winter's, a crossroad game. Now, if you haven't watched our show or listened to our show or know anything about Dead of Winter, it's basically a semi-cooperative game where you can have a betrayer, but you're basically trying to fight out zombies and survive a certain amount of rounds. I'm sure this is going to be on other people's lists, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. I'll leave that for them. I should talk about why I love it. And simply the stories that come out of this game. You got little random events that happen, and sometimes it lead to like ridiculous stories that you as a player end up telling you cooperatively among the group. And those stories are told many times over. We have some stories that happened years ago. We still talk about like the dog that got a shotgun and shot down his own father because his father turned into a zombie. Sometimes they're ridiculous like that. Sometimes they kind of make thematic sense though.
Yeah, it's a good pick. So mine, you get to visit the cold, dead planet of Mars. So my number 10 is actually Terraforming Mars Ares Edition. Terraforming Mars Ares Edition is not an expansion for Terraforming Mars, it's a standalone game. It is in a similar vein as Race for the Galaxy or Eminent Domain, where you do role selection and you get to do the different roles that everyone selected. So it has the flavor of Terraforming Mars, but it has a much lower play time. And that is mainly why I like it, because I think it's a lot faster paced game. There's a lot more strategy elements to the game with player interaction, which I think Terraforming Mars doesn't have as much of player interaction. So there's a lot more player interaction with Terraforming Mars Ares Edition. And that's my number 10.
I want to ask questions about that, but I'll save it for next week.
All right, so this is Peter, and my number 10 for my list is Unmatched, which is an asymmetrical miniature fighting game for 2 to 4 players, and each of the heroes that you can play as are represented by a unique deck that's designed to evoke their style and the legend behind them. You're going to be able to, at this point, if you were to pick up this game system, you're going to either buy a box with 2 characters in it or a box with 4 characters in it, more than likely, and each box then comes with a double-sided battle mat in it as well. And you play as characters such as Robin Hood, Bigfoot, Sherlock Holmes, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Deadpool, and a myriad of other characters, either from kind of like geek culture or folklore and mythology. And there's even been, I think one of the newest ones had Bloody Mary in it as well, with a really cool miniature of her breaking through a bathroom mirror. So yeah, each one of them, like I said, comes with a deck, and you're going to be playing against your opponents, and you can play in a 1v1 heads-up match or a 2-player team, so 4 players total, and you can fight each other to the death. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, and you're just going to be moving your mini around the board, playing cards until there's just one person standing. So that is Unmatched, and it is a lot of fun.
Mini games are awesome. Side note.
My number 10 for this time around is actually going to be Concordia. This is an oldie and a goodie for sure. The game's about trading in the Mediterranean or setting up trade houses or expanding the Roman Empire or something like that. But it doesn't matter because it's well made, well balanced, and a joy to play.
All right. So my number 10 is actually a game that we have mentioned quite a few times here in the recent weeks. And I enjoyed it enough that I think it's in my top 10. That is actually going to be Shiver Me Timbers. So I put that in there as a game. It is probably one of the best sandbox games I've ever played. It's got pirates, which are naturally phenomenal, and it just covers everything that you want a pirate game to be. So there's no way that I could not put that in my top 10 because it's just great. I'm not going to go too much into it because I think over the last 3 or 4 recordings we've done, we've gone pretty well and pretty in depth. Or if you want to see what it's like, you can just watch our playthrough video.
What is your number 9, Nathan?
So my number 9 is nothing new to the list. Again, it's Blood Rage. Now, many of us love Blood Rage, if not all of us, because awesome. It's just an awesome game. I'll get the Eric Lang reference out early. I'm sure that name's going to be talked about a lot. But yeah, Blood Rage is a monsters on the map to area control style game with weird, really cool powers these monsters have. You're spending rage to get minis out on the board and trying to combat, and you can actually win by losing, which is really cool. We've played it many times on the channel, so you can if you're interested and you've watched our channel at all, you've definitely seen this game.
All right, this is James, and my number 9. We're going to go to the post-apocalyptic future where a wasteland awaits you, and you have robots and humans and stuff, and that is going to be 51st State by Portal Games, developed by Ignacy Cevicek. This is probably my favorite game that he has ever designed. It plays similar to Glory to the Realm. It uses multi-purpose cards where you're just sort of maximizing or making your different actions you can take more efficient throughout the game. And it has a really, really good, like Glory to Rome has the same thing, but you can actually buy 51st State, and it has a really good ramping up at the end of the game. Like, the end of the game goes really fast. So it's just a really fun, really easy to teach game that doesn't take a whole lot of time to play. And that's my number 9, 51st State. Up to you, Peter.
All right. Yeah. So my number 9 is a classic worker placement game that is fantastic for introducing new people to the genre, to board games in general. It's been on our list for years in the past, and that is Lords of Waterdeep. One, I like worker placement games a ton. I think they're fantastic. This one just happens to have the wonderful Dungeons and Dragons theme laid over top of it, even though it doesn't really affect the game itself much. But it is such a well-designed, streamlined worker placement game that I think it's one that could easily be anyone's favorite, even just their favorite first board game if they're getting introduced to the hobby. The rules are very easy and it plays well every single time you play it. So Lords of Waterdeep, that's my number 9.
All right, Dan back, and my number 9 this time around is going to be another old favorite, at least for me, and that's Fortune and Glory, the cliffhanger game. This game could have been higher on my list, but I only got a couple plays logged this time around. But needless to say, if you don't know this game, it is Indiana Jones in a box. That's all I need to say. It's a huge thematic mess of a game that is Indiana Jones in a box.
All right, back to Evan here, and I'm going to talk about my number 9. So with Dan's Indiana Jones in a box, in kind of the same vein here, number 9 for me is going to be Star Wars Rebellion. So to go over basically that game, if you have watched episode 4, 5, and 6, you know Star Wars Rebellion. It is basically those movies packed into a game 100%. You can play as the Empire and be overpowering in the beginning, trying to find and destroy the rebel base. You can be the Rebellion, trying to topple the Empire with weaker forces and having to use your agents to complete missions. And a lot of the events that happened are pulled straight from the movies. It's a phenomenal game, plays really well. I absolutely love every time that I can get it out. It's just a great one.
Nathan is back with my number 8, which is a cooperative light campaign game with program movement called Mechs versus Minions. Now, this is a game with phenomenal production value, especially for the price. This game was produced almost pretty much sold at cost. Hard to get for a long time. And basically you are, using cards to program your mech to do certain actions, and you have to do those actions in orders as you have to plan out, okay, I want to go 2 spaces forward and shoot, then the next I want to turn right and fire, then I want to do a AoE blast all around me. And every round you're doing that, but you're slowly modifying it every round, so you're adding another step or overriding a step to change it each round. So if you plan it in, you kind of have to follow that, which can completely throw you off course or have you spectacular turns where you wipe out tons of enemies that have a real adrenaline boost. And it's a nice game that's easy to teach for the level of complexity that actually is involved in it. It takes it step by step and teaches it one element at a time with each step of the campaign.
This is James's number 8, which fell a lot, and that is, but it's still an amazing game. That's Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. There's just so many amazing games out there that this became my number 8. And Twilight Imperium 4th Edition is the quintessential space opera. You're going to play an epic game where you're going to play a faction, and you're going to do that for 6 to 8 hours in this episodic space battle that is going to ensue. And you're just going to be the first one to 10 points, wins the game. Now there's expansions and stuff that change that number, but in general, that's it. It's just an amazing game that when you play it and you sit down, 6 hours goes by and you think it's been like an hour. So that's my number 8, Twilight Imperium 4th Edition.
All right. Yep. This is Peter with my number 8 on my list. And this is one that I know a bunch of the guys in the group really enjoy as well. One that I want to get to the table more and more every time I get the chance to play it. And that is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. And so if you are into your Eldritch horrors, if you are into cooperative board games, if you're into the chance that somebody's going to go insane and turn against the party, this could be a game for you. do. It is a lot of fun. The games, play in somewhere usually 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes they go a little bit longer depending on the scenario, but that's the great thing. There's a lot of scenarios that can be played. The second edition is app driven. So it's got a really well streamlined app that runs with the game and helps you to maneuver and run all of the bad guys and interact with the different clues and the scenery and everything in the room. So yeah, it's a big box game. It's a lot of fun. If you like the horror genre and the cooperative play genre, then you can't pass up Mansions of Madness second edition. You gotta give it a shot. So that is my number 8 to Dan.
Yes, we're on 8. So my 8 is going to be the Quacks of Quedlinburg game. Quacks of Quedlinburg is a bag builder where you're purchasing these chits and putting them into your bag. You can't really look at the contents of your bag, but you can kind of feel around to see how many are left as you're pulling them out. And it's got a cool push your luck mechanic, and all the different colored chits that are in your bag sort of have special powers attached to them. And there's like 4 different sets of special powers, just the base game. So this game has got a good variability, fast play time, and I really enjoy the tactical nature of it.
All right. So Evan here with my number 8. So my number 8 here, I highly doubt it's going to be anybody else's. This is a real unknown game, but it is Rise to Nobility. So Rise to Nobility is put out by Final Frontier Games. It is a worker/dice placement game where you collect resources. The idea being behind the game, you are one of the 5 races that exist in this world, and a new capital is being built. So you take it upon yourself to try and make the most harmonious city possible. So as you roll your dice per the turn, you can place on many different squares to collect your resources. But on top of that, with the resources, you can actually place guilds. And whenever people go to those squares, you can also collect resources for yourself when they're collecting resources. And there's many different avenues of victory into the game. It's just a really nice polished game overall, and it's super fun to play. And it has an expansion that came with it that really made the game even more fun by adding another element of resource to it. I really love it. It's one of my favorite games that I own.
I just pulled this up real quick. It immediately looked to me like a Shem Phillips game, and then I looked up, the reason it's the same artist.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff for Final Frontier. That's what really drew me into their stuff a long time ago, was the art style.
I have no idea how to pronounce that name, though. I'm not even going to try.
He calls himself the Miko or the Maiko. I'm not sure which way to pronounce it.
Yeah, even his nickname's hard to pronounce. That's not great.
Yeah, they're from like Macedonia or something like that.
This is Nathan, and on to my number 7, which is the only card game on my list. So this game already has a sequel, and that's The Crew. And then The Crew Mission to Deep Sea. The original's Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. And I actually prefer The Quest for Planet 9. Maybe it's just nostalgic. Have you been nostalgic about a year ago? Most people seem to prefer the Mission to Deep Sea, though it's largely the same game. And this is one of the few games I've played 200 times, and I'm not exaggerating. I've literally played this game at least 200 times. It's a quick card game that can be pretty intense, because what's happening is you have missions, each hand of cards, that such as, okay, this particular person has to get the 5 of yellow. And taking the tricks doesn't matter. All that matters is making sure that particular person gets that 5 of yellow, and you're not allowed to communicate other than some very restrictive communication rules. That's the quest for Planet 9.
This is James, and my number 7 is Gloomhaven, the quintessential dungeon delving legacy-ish game that has over 100 missions inside of it that can take over 100 hours to play. It's just the all-in-one dungeon delving game, pretty much, in my opinion, the only one you really need to get. And I just love playing this with my daughters and unlocking those things. You get to go through multiple different heroes. You get to go through until they retire and then get a new hero and raise them up and stuff. And you get to see Gloomhaven, which is the town that the thing's based off of, grow. It's really, really cool game. And that is my number 7, Gloomhaven.
I just have to, wow. I mean, that 7 is still really high, but that's a lot of games that surpass this for you. Well, I'm interested to see what they are.
Yes, you will be.
All right, so this is Peter with my number 7, and this may be our first repeat of the episode, and I'm going to be repeating Dan on this one with Concordia. Concordia is, as Dan had said, it's kind of a peaceful strategy game. It's all about economic development, and it is based kind of during the Roman times. And you get a map surrounding the Mediterranean over there. And the reason I like it is there is strategy involved. There's not a lot of player conflict or anything involved, but it is helpful to pay attention to what the other players are doing in this game so that you can see what strategy they have taken. So whether you need to bat that strategy a little bit, play a little bit of defense, or maybe nobody's taking the strategy that you love, so you can kind of dive into that strategy. But there's a lot happening in this game. I feel like a lot to take in, and I think it's for 2 to 5 players. Most of the time, they've got a lot of maps, though, that are for the game as well. And they have a wonderful digital adaptation now, which means I can play this game anytime I want, even if I can't get a bunch of people to the table. So it's a lot of fun. It's a really, really good kind of Euro game, and that is Concordia. And so, Dan.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that, though I did think I was going to be the first crossover. There are some games that have already been mentioned that are on my list somewhere. We'll get to them. My number 7, however, is another pirate-themed game. It's Forgotten Waters. Forgotten Waters. This is a cooperative game where the players are all on the same boat together, and it's got a really strong narrative element to it in the form of the digital app that sort of controls the events that randomly come out based on what scenario you're playing and where you are on the map and other variables. But it's well put together, that's for sure.
All right. For my number 7 here, I'm actually going to go to one that was mentioned earlier, and I'm going to say Lords of Waterdeep. So worker placement, D&D themed. Peter mentioned pretty much everything that I was going to mention about the game. It is a great game. It is a good gateway game for people, for your non-board game people. It's been around for quite a while now, but it still shines with its age. It plays really well. You can grab it on Steam too, play it that way digitally. The digital version works really well also. And those last couple times I got to play it was that way. Works really well. I really love the game.
With my number 6, I am giving Dan his second crossover point with Forgotten Waters already. I debated putting this on the list because this is really new to me. I've only had it for a couple weeks, but I played it a bunch of times already. I really enjoy this. This is using the crossroad system from Dead of Winter, and basically it does a lot of the same things, but it does it in a lighthearted, fun way, whereas Dead of Winter is very dark and, can be disturbing at times, so it's not necessarily appropriate for all audiences at times. Whereas this one, it does have a little saucy element to it sometimes, but overall it's lighthearted enough that you can play it with anybody.
All right, this is James, and this is my number 6. And it's really cold outside. It's like the winter. It's like the dead of winter. Dead of Winter is my number 6. Dead of Winter, like we talked about, uses the crossroads system. And honestly, I could pair this one, which I didn't, so it's not going to be on my list anywhere. But I would swap this with Forgotten Waters if someone wanted a pirate theme over the Dead of Winter theme, or the zombie theme. So I guess they share the same place, but I'm going with Dead of Winter because I've had more fun experiences with that game because I've played it more. And that's my number 6, Dead of Winter.
All right, this is Peter with my number 6. And I like a game with a good theme. And I have mentioned that I like worker placement. And so for my number 6, I have Raiders of the North Sea. It's a really fantastic worker placement game. I enjoy the Viking theme that they have it paired with. I like the fact that the worker placement is broken up into 2 parts on the board. You have your village, where you kind of start off the early game. And then once you get your crew together with your cards, you can then go raiding and use your worker placement on the top half of the board as you raid villages and monasteries and fortresses and all those wonderful things. I just really enjoy the action of building up the crew and the fact that you have to every so often kill off some of your crew members and gain Valkyrie. So there's a couple different tracks that you're working on to gain points. Plays really, really well at 2-player, all the way up to its upper end at 4 players. So it's a lot of fun. Again, another one that has a wonderful digital adaptation, which I'm so grateful that more games are coming out with those. And they've got a lot of really good companies making those games more accessible for people. But Raiders of the North Sea, for me, art style, play, everything, it's a fairly quick game to play, but it's got kind of just a very nice teeny level of depth to it that I enjoy as well. So at my number 6, Raiders of the North Sea.
Artist, the Miko, just throwing that out there.
All right, so I guess I'm going to give away my first crossover point now, and it's going to be with James, because my number 6 is the 51st State. The Master Edition is the one that has been in my collection for a couple of years now. This is one of my favorites, and it got played enough this year to make it onto my list somewhere, and this is where it ended up. So I don't have too much to add besides what James already said. It's a cool card-based combo building system where you build an engine and you run it, and it's great.
All right, for my number 6, I'm almost going to give James a crossover point. Almost. And my number 6 is just the original Terraforming Mars. So Terraforming Mars, if you've watched any board game reviews from any podcasts, any YouTubes, this has come up, I'm sure, through many of them. It has been a very popular game since it was released. So it's just as as the title says, you are there working for your corporation to terraform Mars. So it's an engine building game, and you work through collecting your resources and using those resources from the engines that you build, start populating, putting trees, breathable air, and all sorts of different things on Mars. The game plays really well, has a really good digital adaptation on it. They actually just added, I believe, Prelude to the digital version, which was probably the best expansion that they put out for Terraforming Mars. It's a fantastic game.
And I'm surprised I'm the first one to mention this one. This is a nice engine building game with was a unique theme that a lot of people picked up since, and that's Wingspan. Now, Wingspan, you're playing your birds into different environments. You have 4 possible actions where you can either play a bird, feed, lay some eggs, or get some more birds. And each time you get another bird, you increase the power of that action. And so, yeah, the theme is a little bit light, but it's really beautifully done. And they keep adding nice elements to it. I'm really excited to try out the Oceania expansion, what I just got. So I'm really pumped for that.
All right, this is James, and this is my number 5, which is a crossover. So, Vikings. Everyone knows Vikings are awesome. Viking themed games are also awesome. You know what's best about raiding and pillaging? Doing it in a worker placement manner. And that is Raiders of the North Sea. Raiders of the North Sea is one of my favorite worker placement games ever created. It is wonderful how you have to upgrade your meeples as you go up the board. And you sort of unlock them, and then you have this push and pull of when you place a meeple, you have to take a meeple. So sometimes you have to watch out because you're getting that super powerful meeple that you just gained from going farther in, and you're going to probably give it to your opponent. So you have to time it right. Love the game. Wonderful game. And that is Raiders of the North Sea, my number 5.
All right, this is Peter with my number 5, and this is a set collection card drafting game, and that is Seven Wonders Duel. So this is absolutely, bar none, my favorite 2-player game. So definitely my favorite 2-player game. And the fact that you are building these 3 ages, you're building these different structures, you're taking turns with your opponent, drafting a card from the structure, building up your own set collection, and trying to hopefully beat your opponent in victory points. But if you don't look like victory points are an option, you can go with one of the other ways that you can win, with a sudden death through either a military strategy, you can go with the scientific strategy. But if that's not enough, then you can add in some of the expansions to the game as well, with Pantheon, where you get to add in different gods from around the different mythologies around the world. Or you can even add in Agora, which allows you to add in the Roman Senate chambers, and you can try to win by taking control of the Senate. So those are both fantastic expansions to an already what I consider seamless 2-player game. So that is Seven Wonders Duel. If you like really kind of head-to-head games where you really have to pay attention to what that other person is doing, Seven Wonders Duel is going to be a game for you.
All right, so my number 5 will be the first, but possibly not the last game by Alexander Fischer. And this number for me is the Expedition to Newdale. This game was relatively new to me, and I basically played through the entire campaign over the past year, so I had to put it somewhere on my list, and this is where it ended up. This is a engine building game, I'll say. You play cards, and these cards, you sort of bid on what workers are going to be on the market. So there's a push your luck element to it. And these cards then make goods, which you then spend to buy more cards, basically, is how it rolls around. And then, of course, it's got a connected campaign that's 8 scenarios long. So there's like 6 different maps that you can explore with various states of, there's a couple altered rules as well. Expedition to Newdale.
All right. So Evan here with my next one on my list. One that I'm put on here is going to be Betrayal at House on the Hill, a game with such great theme in it. So the idea being you and your cohorts are exploring a house on the hill. Every time you play the game, the layout of the house is completely different. And as you explore more and more, you come across items in different places. And eventually you're going to trigger the haunt. The haunt completely changes the game. And the base game, there's 50 different haunts. So based on what cursed item you find in what room will tell you who's betraying and what's happening on the second half of the game. The expansion added 50 more haunts, more locations in there. So there's so many replays of this game, and it never feels the same, at least every time that we've ever played it. The theme is just fantastic with it. I love that game so much.
Now I have a game for my number 4 that almost fell off the list, but then I got it to the table again and immediately remembered why I love this game so much. And that is Terraforming Mars, the original game. Now, I have played Ares Expedition, but I still vastly prefer the original game. It's just such a meaty game with such meaningful choices. There's so much you can do in it. So much thought goes into which cards to play and when, and what to save and what to get rid of. And I just love this game.
So my number 4 is going to kill Evan's Betrayal House on the Hill when he gets to play it, because I'm not sure he got to play it yet. And that is the perfect Lovecraft game, and that is Mansions of Madness.
I have not got to play this, and I'm waiting for the invitation to play this.
Yes, and I think the same thing happened to Peter. Once you play it, it's just no going back.
No, you can still go back, but it is really great.
Yeah, it is app driven, so it offloaded a lot of the admin work that was in the original Mansions of Madness, and I think that Betrayal House on the Hill could actually do that too if they had an app for it and offloaded that haunt. That may make the game go quicker and faster and be less prone to some of the ambiguous rules that are available in it. But either way, they're both great games. Mansions of Madness is just better. But that is my number 4, Mansions of Madness.
All right, so this is Peter with my number 4, and this one is probably it's a really known intellectual property at this time because of the new movie that just came out for it, but that is the board game Dune. And this is the reintroduction of the game from, I think, the late 70s. It was reissued in 2019 by Gale Force 9, and in this game you're going to be taking on one of 6 of the great factions of the Dune universe. Each faction has their own asymmetrical power, and you're going to be placing your men on the board, trying to take over different areas of the board, and the first player to take over a couple of the specific locations is going to win. You can also win in an alliance. If you have 2 people, then your end goal gets a little bit more difficult, but you got 2 people working towards it. But then you've also got somebody else whose asymmetrical power is that if they guess who wins in which round and they get it right, they win instead of the person who thought that they won. It can lead to a lot of fun backstabbing. It's got a really interesting combat mechanic in there with some cards and a wheel that you dial in at the correct number, and you spend so many of your troops to try to win combats, but you don't want to spend too many troops. So it is a lot of fun. We have played it online together, and we recorded that playthrough, so that's available as well on our YouTube channel if anybody wants to watch it. It's one of our most watched videos that we have. It's a fantastic game. My only nitpick with this one is that you really need to have like a full table for this game to really shine. You want to get 5 to 6 players to the table. So if you do, you're going to have a blast. It's a lot of fun. So my number 4 is Dune.
All right. My number 4 is another card-based combination style game. It's Res Arcana. And Res Arcana, you're basically forging artifacts out of 5 or I think maybe 6 different kinds of mana. You have a very small pool of cards with which to build your engine. It's like 8, but somehow, some way, I have never had a bad game of this. So the combinations work well, and you feel like you can accomplish something over the course of the game. It's really short, so you can sometimes get 2 in at once. I like it. Res Arcana.
All right, so my number 4 is Twilight Struggle. So Twilight Struggle is a 2-player game that simulates the Cold War with the United States versus Russia. So it's a very tug-of-war game. You play the cards over these, and the cards give you different things that will happen. And and you can start up coups and reinforce different areas of the map as you try and vie control over them. And the first person that can get overall victory wins by getting more areas under their control and influence. It's a fantastic 2-player game. It plays probably, I think last time I played it, I got about an hour and a half into it before it came down to nuclear destruction due to an accident, but that happens from time to time. It does play well. It's got some great theme in it, and you can learn actually a little bit of history with it too, as everything is well researched through the game. I really enjoy that one.
Now we're into the illustrious top 3. These are the games that we absolutely love, and anybody who says they don't like it is probably going to get kicked off the podcast.
They stoned you guys.
So my number 3 is a game that almost dropped off the list as well, simply because it has an amazing digital game. The digital version does scratch a slightly different itch than the physical game, so that's why I am still keeping Gloomhaven as my top 3. James already talked about Gloomhaven, and I love it for many of the same reasons I have. It's just a chunky, solid campaign game with somewhat complex rules, but everything works just the way you would think it works. It's very, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. Everything's so well thought out, so perfectly designed.
It's a mechanically elegant game.
There we go. Said much more elegantly than I did.
So my number 3 is done by the greatest designer on the face of the planet. He sets the bar for the rest of the designers, a bar that none of them can reach. They must all bow in his presence when he's near because they know of his excellence. And that is a game designed by Eric M. Lang in one of the greatest games ever created, Vikings. You're going to be Vikings, you're going to be fighting, you're going to be pillaging, you're going to bring monsters in, you're going to be just death, destruction everywhere. Perfect game all around, and that is Blood Rage. Blood Rage is one of the great, there's arguments over it because it's such a great game over whether it's area control or area majority. Doesn't matter. It's area awesome. And that is my number 3, Blood Rage, by the greatest designer on the face of the planet, Eric M. Lang.
We really need to get a sound effect for every time Eric Lang is mentioned.
Oh man, James gives that such a big talk up, and yet it's still only number 3 on his list, which is interesting. So number 3
I vote that the sound effect is a boo.
Number 3 on my list is an absolute fantastic game with an intellectual property I'm sure no one has ever heard about, especially from my 4th on the list, which is now Dune Imperium. So yes, 4th was Dune. 3rd on my list is Dune Imperium. And I was a little surprised as I was putting my list together that Dune Imperium just slightly outstripped the Dune game. And I think that's probably because player count, again, is such a big thing in the original Dune game. Dune Imperium can play 2 to 5 players, though I definitely don't recommend as much the 2-player. I think 3 to 5 players is where Dune Imperium is at. But Dune Imperium is a fantastic worker placement, deck building, card drafting game where you're going to utilize the cards in your hand to place your workers, and then the cards that you have left over at the end of your turn, you're going to use to purchase more cards to make your deck even that much stronger. You're also going to be using the placement of your meeples to decide whether you can put some of your soldiers into a military conflict that happens at the end of each round after each player's had their turn. And then you're going to be using that military conflict to decide on some victory points or other aspects, other rewards for the game. First person to 10 victory points or past the 10 victory point mark going to go ahead and initiate the end game. And at the end of the game, person with the most victory points is going to win. There's a good chance for some surprises as you have some special cards that can be earned throughout the game, which actually is definitely a nice nod to Lords of Waterdeep and another great worker placement game. But Dune Imperium, I think, takes these disparate mechanics in games and just flawlessly blends them together into definitely what I consider to be one of my favorite games, and that is why it is my number 3 game on my list.
Pete, you stole my thunder. Guess what my number 3 is?
Yes, I got it to it first.
Yes, you did by a random die roll that determined the order that we were in. So, folks, my number 3 is Dune Imperium. Pete covered it pretty well. The only mechanic that I will mention that Pete did not mention that I really enjoy pursuing in the game is the factions, right? So like there's like 4 or 5 factions in the game, and you can buy cards that belong to those factions that help you interact with those factions, that help you bump them on their tracks, which is worth points and resources. And some of those spaces that those factions have available to them are pretty busted as well. But other than that, Dune Imperium. It's saying something that this is this high on my list, given the fact that it's a relatively new acquire for me. But yeah, Dune Imperium is number 3 for me.
Well, this is an interesting predicament that we're in now because my number 3 is Dune Imperium. Such a polished engine building and worker placement game. It's really good. The only thing that I'm going to add is there's going to be a great expansion that is coming out eventually that we're all eagerly awaiting, Dan. But I don't really have any more that since they've really covered pretty much everything with that one.
It was pushed back. Don't look at me.
But we have to. You are our pusher. We go to you for our games. We have to blame you.
Shame.
I feel like I'm going to have to defend myself for not having Dune Imperium on my list next week.
Oh, you're definitely going to have to defend yourself. If it's not your number 2 or number 1.
You're going to have to defend yourself now.
Right now.
I can tell you it's my number 16.
Oh, out. Okay, we'll talk about it next week, Nathan.
It is a great game, but
so much
we'll get into it next week.
As Nathan said, he is now off the channel. So.
Oh, no. I walked into that.
He's the one who walked into it. He put himself up for it.
It was fun. I'll finish my top 2, and then, I guess I won't be here next week. My number 2 is a game that I think Evan is wrong on, simply for having it so low on its top 10, and that's Shiver Me Timbers. This is amazing sandbox game, and sandbox games are really a hard genre to nail because the balancing has to be perfect. You have to be able to do many possible paths to victory, and all of them have to be perfectly balanced to make equally valid. And this does it better than any game I've ever played. And Dan's probably thinking, oh, what about Zaya? That's not quite on my top 10, but it is nearly there.
Don't worry, Dan. He's off the podcast anyway. So
that's right. We'll play Zaya without him.
So this is gonna be my number 2. So Peter's wrong, Dan's wrong, Evan's wrong, and Nathan's super. I don't know what's wrong with Nathan. He just had something wrong with him. The spice must flow. Dune Imperium is my number 2 of all time. It is an amazing game. I like everything about it. It's like Clank and Lords of Waterdeep had a baby, and it was perfect, and that's Dune. It's just great. It's so easy to teach. It's so you could get into it super quick. So it's pretty much an entry-level game for people. It's another reason I love it, because once you play like a couple turns of this game, you really get it down. And your second game, you're pretty much an expert at it and play at a competitive level. I just love this game. It's really well designed. Can't wait until Dan finally lets us get that expansion. I mean, geez. But anyway, that is my number 2, Dune Imperium. And Nathan is really wrong. Really wrong.
All right, so it's Peter again with my number 2. And again, number 3 and number 2 for me are like, it's as close as they can possibly get to being equal with one another. But I am just really happy that at this point I get to say, Eric M. Lang, if you're listening, I choose you more than James chooses you. So my number 2 is Blood Rage. I absolutely love Blood Rage. This game is, again, it's Vikings. It's Vikings. It's Norse mythology. You are doing area control, doing some deck building. If you're figuring out what's the best thing to do as you're competing against one another. Like Nathan said earlier, you can lose and yet still win this game. And somehow every single time I play this game with James and Nathan and Dan, I shoot myself in the foot. I ended up losing the game from stupid decisions I make. And yet, even when I lose, oh my gosh, do I enjoy this game. The miniatures are great. The board is great. I'm just a really big fan. Again, another game that has a wonderful digital adaptation. Blood Rage is just a beautifully designed game, and I really enjoy it every single time I play it. So number 2, that's right, Eric M. Lang. I like you more than James does. Blood Rage.
All right. I will heretofore grant my last crossover point. My last crossover point, I think, goes to Nathan, is the only other person who mentioned this game. My number 2 was the Quest for Planet 9, The Crew. This game is a cooperative trick-taking game with limited communication, and we've been having a blast with it. It crawled up here this high on my list, probably due to play count, I'm going to say. But yeah, really well put together. And every time we sit down and play a couple hands, it's like solving puzzle, which is a really cool thing to do with my brother, which is how I've been mostly playing this one.
All right. So Evan back here with my number 2. And I'm going to have to give the point here to James on this one. This is not an Eric M. Lang game, though. So just let's cool ourselves a bit. But this is going to be Twilight Imperium. So it is a great 4X game. It does play long, 6-8 hours to get into the game, but like James says, it does go by so fast because there's so much that you're doing, so much that you're managing, and it's a game that you can't focus just on one thing, because if you focus on one thing, you're going to lose terribly in the game. You have to be able to manage your resources. You have to manage your fleet. You just can't go out and battle all the time because it's expensive to build them. You have to be able to be diplomatic to the other people and form alliances, and the game just does all that, and it doesn't do it okay. It does it phenomenally. This game is my number 2. I have not played 4th edition. I used to own a copy of 3rd edition until I donated it to our collection. And the last time that I played it was probably somewhere in the realm of 10 to 12 years ago. And it's still number 2 on my list.
Nice. This top 3 has been a roller coaster of emotions so far. And unfortunately, I have to go with something predictable for my number 1. It's the same one I was last year. And probably the last game I'll get to talk about on this podcast. That's Mansions of Madness.
Nathan just redeemed himself.
I mean, it's a great game that changes each time you play it. The app allows for randomization of events and changing of storylines as you get new expansions. It incorporates those into the previous games you've played, so you can go back and play that game. Because of the expansions, it's changed it all up, and it's also got really cool narration. So it's a really phenomenal game, which really made apps a big thing in board games.
All right, my number one game. You get to play as a captain, getting your first ship, sailing out in the 7 seas, and you have the freedom for the first time in your life to decide what you want to do. Do you want to help the governor and complete different quests, helping out and building the fortresses and the different areas? Or do you want to be a privateer and take down Spanish ships and steal and plunder like a pirate? Or do you want to go into mysticism and fight the Kraken and all that fun stuff? My number 1 game is Shiver Me Timbers. That game is an amazing sandbox game. The board game itself is insane in the component quality. You get to play with these big chunky ships, and they're modular, they come apart, and you can add your cannons, take away your cannons. So not only is it a fun sandbox game, but the physical game itself is amazing to just watch while everyone plays and see the ships moving around. You can visually see the power of everyone's ships out there, which is really great. You know exactly how fast they can go. You know exactly what their power is. You know exactly what their cargo hold is. It's just a really, really well-designed game that has a lot of stuff in it that could have been easily done incorrectly, but they did it great. And that is my number 1, the greatest game ever created, Shiver Me Timbers. Mic drop, I win.
But Eric M. Lang didn't design that one.
It's true. I mean, my whole top 10 could be Eric M. Lang, but I got to give other people a little fair, you know.
All I can say before I tell you my number 1 is how sad I am that I did not get to play Shiver Me Timbers with you guys because of how much you guys are talking it up. And I was already sad that I didn't get to play and I missed that week. I'm even more sad now, which just means we need to get another playthrough of this game together so I can see the awesomeness that is Shiver Me Timbers. But I now follow through with my number 1 game of all time. I just have to remind everyone, our name is Tabletop Gaming, not board game. My number 1 game is Dungeons and Dragons. I will play Dungeons and Dragons for hours and hours. It is the most time I've spent playing any game ever is Dungeons and Dragons. It's the most thought, it takes up most of my thinking than any other game is Dungeons and Dragons. Getting my friends together, watching them create their own heroes, not being limited by anything other than this vast amount of rule sets that are out there. You talk about expansions. There's new Dungeons and Dragons content coming out from third-party content creators every single day. Can't keep up with the amount of stuff that is available out there. You can homebrew your own stuff. The adventure is completely up to you and the players at your table. And so that is why they will give me the hardest time forever, but I will still back myself up with this. I absolutely love Dungeons and Dragons. And that is my number 1.
I'm speechless.
Well, folks, here we go. My number 1. My My number one is a game where you take on the role of a ship captain. No, folks, you're all wrong, because my number one is Maracaibo, best Alexander Fisher game I've played to date. In the game Maracaibo, you do take on the role of a ship captain. You're exploring the Caribbean, and it is another like card-based engine building game where you're spending coins to play cards down in front of you, which develop your tableau, which give you special abilities, which allow you to, move down the exploration track or fight battles better or gain income or victory points as the game progresses. It takes place over a measly 4 rounds, and this game has an amazing narrative campaign built into it that we're still not quite done with. But so there's going to be more plays of this happening in the future.
We are now down to the final number one game. This is going to be the best of the best because I have the last one going, and everyone knows that the last thing that you hear on this stuff is what you retain the most of. So now you get to listen to me ramble on here. And the number one game for me is going to be a classic game with a modern twist, and that is Monopoly Cheater Edition. I can't even do that with a straight face. So actually my number one game is a Viking game, Viking worker placement game. Champions of Midgar. Champions of Midgar is actually my favorite game out there. So worker placement, you have to build your band. You have to acquire your Vikings that are represented as dice and use them to battle draugrs and trolls and take them on the adventures and battle creatures across the sea and have your resources to keep them up to date and fed. You have a couple expansions in there that give more options in there, and you can get the Valhalla expansion that even after your Vikings die, they go to Valhalla and are morphed into set collection that gives you even more powers. I just absolutely love the game. It's a great game. It's been out for a little bit, and it's still my number one game. And I would like to take this time and say, originally, when I was putting my list together, I did have a couple non-board games on here, and Dungeons & Dragons was going to be on my list. I didn't bring myself to put it on there. I was going to have a couple miniature games on there too, but I was like, oh, well, people don't listen to me talk about that right now. So
it's all right. It's all right, Evan. Last year was my very first top 10 list ever, and I made sure to leave Dungeons & Dragons off to focus strictly on board games. But this year, I had to put it where it belongs, and that is number one.
So, since I'm editing, hey, Peter, can you say Shiver Me Timbers?
Shiver Me Timbers.
Oh, good. Now it's your new number one.
Can't put it my number one. I didn't even get to play it yet. I haven't played it.
That's great. That's great.
Well, there's a major takeaway from this.
Yes.
I think it has to be addressed right now. This is the least mentions of Eric Lang in any of our top 10s ever.
It's true.
So that means Eric M. Lang, hurry up and release a new game.
Yeah, he's supposed to come out with Blood Rage 2.
Someday. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our top 10 list. Don't forget to come back to the next episode where we just destroy each other for the games that we have chosen. And the games, for some reason, like Nathan didn't choose. I don't know what's up with that. So
Nathan who?
Yeah, Nathan who? That's right.
Thank you for listening. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Board Game Geek Guild 2989, or our website at tabletopgamingguild.com. Don't forget to like, follow, and or subscribe. Tabletop Gaming Guild is a product of Tabletop Gaming Guild LLC. All rights reserved.